Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Is it possible that heading into next year, we have a little bit of a different top three from what we've seen throughout the Black Ops Cold War season? Does seem as though everybody from Atlanta is going to stick together. And even if those players from Toronto do end up sticking together, is it possible that a squad like LA Thieves and a squad like NYSL ends up being the teams that round out that top three? At least that's what we've seen a little bit as of late. So in this video, we're going to break it down, see who we heard this from, and what those possible squads might look like. We'll go back to our big graphic and we'll break it all down. I'll show you what it looks like and we'll compare and see if those rosters do compare to some of those other teams like Toronto and Minnesota and that potential OpTic Dallas team. So if you're new around here, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Anytime we get any news, I'm here breaking it down. Leave a like as it always helps out the channel. But without further ado, this is the list that Nubsy, so the former coach of the Seattle Surge, had on his stream the other day. As we take a look at this, you can see as we walk through this that up here in the top left, he has the Atlanta FAZE as number one. But as we go through and look at this, at least in my opinion, I would just expect Toronto, if they make no moves, to be number two. And he has them as number four, which means some pretty significant pieces must be going to who he has ranked as number two and number three. We look at number two, he has as LA Thieves. He has NYSL as number three. And then from there, he puts Toronto Ultra ahead of Dallas, or this Dallas OpTic merger squad. And then he has Minnesota at 6. And this is a bit different from me. But another thing of note here is that he even has LAG at 7 ahead of squads like Florida, who he has at 9, and he has London all the way up to number 8. So he must be pretty high on that potential London squad that we've been talking a little bit as of late. But as we see this, we'll get into our big board. Also, we did see something similar to Zed. So Zed did go ahead and he retired officially just today. He did a stream where he started to talk a little bit about different teams that might be making moves. So he kind of echoed exactly what Nubsy had here, and let's see how this would work out. So in my mind, at least as we're looking through these squads, there wasn't a ton known so far when it comes to LA Thieves, but what people are thinking is that obviously the first two to start with are Kenny and Octane. So if you have Kenny and you have Octane, I think most people would agree that if you compare that main AR and that flex duo, I think they fare pretty well against those that are who I have in the top two when it comes to the Atlanta FaZe and the Toronto Ultra, right? I think you could put them up against Cellium and Arcees. Might not quite be that high of a ceiling, but they're still absolute menaces on the map. When it comes to Ultra, perhaps maybe we need to see it across multiple titles from Insight, but we know that Cammy is one of, if not the top flex in the league. So I think they match up pretty well with those two, and from there I think that those two as a combination are probably better than anybody else. But when it comes to the LA Thieves, you still have to round out the SMG positions, and if you're gonna put LA Thieves at number 2, then it's probably not gonna include Draza and Hook. It's probably, it seems in my mind, it seems like Envoy probably goes there, but what they're missing is that super fast route man SMG. And it seems as though, by all accounts, that player might be Vivid. And when it comes to this pairing or this squad of 4, I think you have all the pieces you need. It's just how will they compare against some of those other top squads? So I 1000% could see this being a really good squad, but in my mind, I'm not quite sure I see them being better than that Toronto Ultra squad. To me, it doesn't seem to make a ton of sense. So again, we'll touch on this more in a second, but there was LA Thieves, and then his third ranked team was the New York Subliners. So if we look at New York Subliners, if you're gonna put NYSL as a top 3 team in this squad, I think you would have to agree that Crim and Clay are probably the 2 ARs on this squad. Now, obviously, Hydra is not going anywhere. Hydra was one of the breakout players, especially in respawns throughout the Black Ops Cold War season, but they are missing a 4th. So, do they roll with a seam here? I guess that's absolutely a possibility. But if a seam is there, does that make them better than Atlanta FaZe, Toronto Ultra, the Minnesota ROKKR squad from last year, or even something that's not getting really a ton of talk or play at all amongst these squads is this proposed OpTic Envy or OpTic Empire squad up here in the top right. So if it's a seam, I don't think that they compare with those squads. I think the only thing that could potentially make them a top 3 squad would be if they sign a deal for Neptune. And if Neptune goes there, I do think that he's still a tiny bit rough around the edges. I think we've seen countless number of times that he has the ability to absolutely take over a map, to take over a series, to really put the squad on his back. And when you have that with Neptune, and you also have that ability with Hydra, not to mention you have 2 of the most influential ARs and 2 of the most winningest ARs alongside them, I definitely think that this could be a nasty squad. But even still, I don't know what it is. I'm just not really sure if I see them being better than an Ultra squad or than the ROKKR squad. And one of the biggest things that comes to mind is that they better hope, if these are the squads for LA Thieves, NYSL, they better hope that going into Vanguard, whatever the meta is, ends up being 2 ARs and 2 SMGs. Because if it's 3 SMGs, I feel like LA Thieves would probably be okay, because we have seen in the past that Kenny can play SMG. He is absolutely a better player with an AR in his hand. There's no doubt about it, but he can do it. Now, the issue is that, yes, he can do it and he can play pretty well with it, but he's not going to play at the level of Celium, right? And that's what makes a player like Celium, a player like Cammy, even a player like Priesta with Minnesota ROKKR, that's what makes players like them so valuable, is that you put a 3rd SMG in Priesta's hands. We saw what he was able to do when he was on the Atlanta FaZe, and how much of a game changer that can be for him, where he doesn't necessarily have to be the entry SMG. He doesn't necessarily have to be just the plain Slayer SMG. He can be a little bit crafty in that role, and that's what made Priesta so good. So, I don't know. When I look at LA Thieves, I think that they might compare, but that's where they might lag behind just a tiny bit. And the most obvious approach here is that when it comes to NYSL, if Clay has to run an SMG or if Crim has to run an SMG, I just feel like that is absolutely not going to work out. They'll get torched by Atlanta, by Toronto, by Minnesota, by LA Thieves, probably get torched by the Florida Mutineers, and definitely that OpTic squad. So I feel like there are a few things that probably have to go in their favor. We'll see what happens. I necessarily don't agree. I think even if these are the squads, I think that it's Atlanta and Toronto as 1 and 2. Then from there, I could maybe see one of them being 3. I'm still super high on that Minnesota ROKKR squad. I feel like in those 3 teams, if you're comparing the players, I think Standy is probably the best SMG. Even though there are some unbelievably talented SMGs there, I still think Standy is the most electric SMG on each of those rosters. So we'll see. Of course, I will 1000% agree that they have an edge when it comes to main AR and flex from the AR positions. But one other thing that I wanted to talk about is how they had, and how we saw a couple times, that LAG was ranked all the way up into that 7th place, which is up from really 10th or 11th where they ended the Black Ops Cold War season. And I think if that's the case, then the 2 that have to be there in order for that to be the case is Gunless and Slasher. I think if these 2 are there, I think this duo can compete in a lot of matches, maybe not with the top 6 per se, but they're definitely going to be better, at least in my mind, than a Seattle squad, a potential Paris squad, a potential whoever the new squad is, right? Like, they're probably not going to be firmly cemented in that bottom 4. I do think London will be much improved from where they've been in the past, but from here, they do have to have some influential SMGs on their squad also. So it seems like a lot of people are talking about Pristini and Gunless sticking together. So that might be one. And if a lot of these events are held on LAN like they were last year, we saw how on LAN Gunless and Pristini and Octane and even Nikki D are entirely different players. So that could also help them out. Maybe they go ahead and they get somebody like Draza to come here. Again, it might be a bit of a stretch. Maybe Draza even sticks with LA Thieves. I think he and Vivid are probably pretty close. They're not exactly the same player, but those two could be interchangeable here. Then who knows what happens with Hook? Who knows what happens with Zaptius? Zaptius played really well for London to start and then for Paris after that. So there's a ton of different things that could happen from here. One of the biggest holes before we get this one out of here is now if Neptune goes to NYSL, how does Florida fill their openings? Is it a seam and then the same kind of thing? They'll be looking for another SMG. So there are some question marks, but if these proposed squads end up happening, I feel like you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have a top 6, which is really nasty. And then London and Florida and LAG can compete from there with who might be the 7th and the 8th squads and then who's really ultimately fighting for champs. So down in the comments below, how do you feel about those proposed NYSL or LA Thieves squads? Do you think they can compete at least throughout the entirety of the season when it comes to the Toronto Ultra and the Minnesota ROKKR and that proposed OpTic squad? I'm not necessarily sold, but it's absolutely possible. And if those are the squads, I'll be excited to see it. So if you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Every time there's a Roster Mania update, we're going to be talking about it. Make sure you leave a like as it really helps out the channel. And with that, thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the next Roster Mania upload.